Lykeion Books presents Saltwater Witch by Chris Howard, Book 1 in the Seaborn Trilogy. Read for you by the author.
Chapter 2 Cassandra. The water felt good and held her in its arms. Comfort was the last thing she expected. No one should be comfortable right before drowning, but something stronger than her will, stronger than any of her fears, assured her she had been through worse in the last 15 or 16 years. So Cassandra put her terror in a box and shelved it in the back of her mind, right next to a big locked box of rage, which came in handy sometimes. Then she pulled in a deep breath and held it. Red Bear Lake closed over her head, smooth green folds of water, cool and gentle against her throat. And as the surface slipped away in rings of watery sunlight, a whispering voice drifted by, repeating one word: breathe. Cassandra felt the sharp edge of panic trying to close in, but something in her head took over and mixed her own thoughts with strange new ones, distracting her. I will never know my real home, my world. I will never know my language, my city, my people. I will never sing their songs. St. Clement's Education Center, her crappy boarding school in the middle of Nebraska, had never been her home, not really. Some of the thoughts were definitely hers, others weren't, and something was mixing them together inside her head. Some didn't even make sense. I have a city? What city? Gold flashed above her, and a tiny loop of metal fell into the depths of Red Bear Lake with her, catching the sunlight in bright sparks. Paddling upright, she reached over her head through the green water, hooking something cold in her fingers. She pulled it in, stared at the metal links of jewelry a moment, and then looked up at the surface 20 feet above. She let out a short burst of air and focused on the weight and the smoothness of the metal links in the palm of her hand. It was Deirdre's bracelet. Serves her right for pushing me in. Cassandra was about to let it go, lost forever at the bottom of the lake. She held her fist closed around it, looking into the black, muddy depths below, and then opened her fingers, caught the bracelet, and slipped it over one hand. Then she let out more of her air. This seemed like the perfect time for panicking. But the silent, gloomy lake was peaceful, peaceful like death. Can my heart work after I'm dead? Nope. She heard and felt her own heartbeat thudding in her chest, so not dead yet. A woman's whispering voice glided by, a soft rustle like water running over sand. The sea sifting through billions of tiny grains of rock. She turned to chase it and heard sad, piping tones, growing louder as she fell into darker and darker water. That's my mother's song. She didn't remember anything about her mother or father, and the song she sometimes heard in the back of her mind was the only hint that she once had a life somewhere else. There were words in the song, but she didn't understand them, almost as if she had memorized the sounds of a different language, in the same way she learned Frere Jacques at some point, but couldn't say what the song was about. Dormez-vous? Sonnez la matina? That sparked another strange thought, and made her wonder for the first time if she was actually an American, and if not, what the hell was she doing here in the middle of it? The whispering again. Breathe. She ignored it. It had to be some trick of sound underwater. She was trying to convince herself that it was just her hearing playing games with her, until the whisperer used her name. Breathe, Cassandra. It was a gentle and motherly voice, but now the word breathe was a command, and she felt the air in her lungs climbing into her throat in response. Are you stupid? Her voice came out muffled in wobbly bubbles that shot to the surface, glassy little worlds of air that caught and coiled through the long tangles of her hair. Do not argue with me, the voice told her. Swinging her arms out, she paddled in a circle, looking for the speaker. That definitely sounded like something a mother would say, do not argue with me. And she found herself scowling and rummaging around for the keys to that box of rage. Breathe, the voice was getting impatient. The water felt heavy against her skin. She kicked weakly, her throat burned, begging her to draw a breath. Then the thought that she couldn't make it back to the surface hit her. Don't know what took so long. Her arms were thrashing around on their own. I can't stop sinking. Take the water inside you, Cassandra. Stop talking to me. The shout was a waste of air. She could hear her own voice in her head, but it came out of her mouth as a gurgling rush of noise and bubbles. The motherly voice came back, commanding, "Close your eyes now." She shut her eyes. The lake water burned in her throat, slippery and sharp and cold, like a mouthful of needles. There was a taste to the water, ancient chalk, a bitter, rotting edge, something very old, something alive. Greedy for air, the lake swallowed her life from the inside out, swelling in her lungs, pushing under her tongue, icy against her teeth. The chill swept over her lips and cheeks, around her ears and forehead, soft like velvet against her throat, her toes and fingers surrounding every strand of hair. The song grew louder, walling off the rest of the thick, fluid world around her. And then it became hers, all of it. A spasm of understanding ripped through her. This is my world. On the outside, the lake water pressed against her skin. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a whirling current where her own thoughts had never traveled. Sparks in the gloom of her closed eyes, flashing by her at first, and then they slowed down and let her catch glimpses of light reflecting off carved rocks, a sharp ledge over moving black water, a room with strong currents spiraling endlessly around a wide, lightless pit. The water was falling into it, lost forever. She caught sight of a row of black doorways leading off a wet stone chamber, and then it was gone. "Do not believe what they say about your mother," the woman's voice told her, and there was an angry edge to the words. Cassandra's eyes snapped open, and she could feel her brows climbing somewhere into the middle of her forehead. "And here I thought you were my mother. Your mother saved you." Cassandra fought the sudden urge to argue. But a flash of angry teeth and fists, a voice shouting at her from the past, and she repeated the words because it was all she knew about her mother. "Director Matrothi told me my mother's in prison, that she killed her best friend." "A lie. She saved you. She saved me. My name is... it won't let me say it." The woman struggled to speak, sighed, and as her voice faded, said, "I must go." Swinging her hands out to claw at empty water, Cassandra spun in the gloom. "Please don't." She waited for an answer, breathed slowly, the water heavy in her throat and lungs. No one answered. The song had died, the voice was gone, and the silence suddenly hurt. "I'm breathing underwater." She would definitely have to tell her science teacher, Mr. Henderson, about this. He's going to flip his shit. The lake jumped, blurred her vision. She was caught in a ring of rapidly expanding water, like the shock wave of a bomb exploding in the depths. Cassandra looked past her feet, and a woman's sickly pale face emerged from the gloom, her skin a washed-out greenish color. Long, stringy black hair floated about her head, Medusa-like. The skull of some sharp-toothed animal floated in front of her on a chain around her neck. The pale woman opened her mouth, grinning with rows of sharpened teeth as she grabbed Cassandra's ankle and jerked her to the bottom. Screaming, Cassandra threw her head back, reaching for the surface. The water thickened with clouds of silt, and the thing with sharp teeth dragged her like an anchor to the floor of the lake. It spoke to her, a raspy, high-pitched screech. "Give me your other foot, girl." Without thinking, Cassandra pulled one leg up and kicked down as hard as she could, felt her heel catch the woman in the chin, cutting off a wailing tone that went right through her clothing and skin with 1,000 needle stabs. Soft ribbons of blood curled around her. Crap, like real needles. Cassandra pulled both her legs up, her whole body starting to shake. "You witch!" Stunned, she floated there in the water, gaping down at the monster, thoughts racing through her head, but too fast to catch and act on any of them. That was all it took. A few seconds' hesitation, and she had lost any advantage she had just won by kicking the witch in the face. "Move your ass, Cass." Another screechy noise came from below. The sound chased her, turned when she turned, diving deeper into the lake to follow her. Cassandra flipped on her back, trying to get out of its way, heading into the darkness, panicking because insane questions were lining up in her head. Who knew there were witches lurking in the depths of obscure inland lakes? Ratty black hair, pale skin, wearing aquatic mammal skulls as jewelry? Had to be a witch. What else could it be? And then a more important question shouldered its way to the front. "I can swim?" She had never had swimming lessons. A bathtub gave her nightmares. 5 gallons gathered in one place was enough to make her knees shake. Swimming was suddenly like dancing, something else she wasn't very good at. She twirled in the water, ducking her head, arching her back against another attack of sharp noise. A glance behind, and she kicked fluidly away. Cassandra's body knew how to move, spiraling and bending, an acrobat dodging, a drawer full of thrown knives. Then, because it felt like the right thing to do, she stopped in a beam of watery sunlight about 50 feet down, paddling upright when everything went quiet. The lake witch shot out of the gloom, grabbed her, mouth open with a sharp-toothed grin. Fingernails like metal hooks ripped through Cassandra's shirt, digging into the skin, clawing up her arms, working their way toward her throat. Nothing to hold on to, nothing solid to brace herself against. Cassandra made a high sobbing noise, and the witch pushed her upside down, driving both of them into the dark. Cloudy water rushed by her, coils of hair whipping around her face. Cassandra hooked her legs around the witch, used her for leverage, and then twisted her shoulders out of the hold, sharp nails cutting through skin. Kicking away, she tasted her own blood streaming through the water, a weird bitter tingling that slid over her tongue. Beneath her, the lake witch flipped over in one snapping motion, very fish-like, and came after her, teeth bared, something close to a smile on her face. Another quick look, and Cassandra kicked straight up, cupped her hands and pulled the water past, trying to get to the surface as fast as she could. The witch screeched again. Weaving through the water wasn't enough. The sound chased her, and when it caught her, it went right through her shorts and shirt, through her skin to the bones, leaving hundreds of separate points of pain. In the water, noise hurts. Cassandra waved away more of her blood. Hurts like hell. She tucked her head down, diving back into the darkness, slicing through a thick cloud of stirred-up mud that swirled around her like a billowing black cumulus. Her muscles burned, and she urged her legs to kick faster, leveling out when she sensed the lake's muddy floor. There was something giving her directions. As she drew closer to the bottom of the lake, there was a tone way in the back of her head that rose in pitch as she approached. Swinging left a bit more than a half turn to get her headed the right way, she pushed her aching muscles harder and shot back to the surface. Off on her right, she passed the witch coming the other way. A second later, the woman did a sharp, kicking 180 and came after her. The cat and mouse game wasn't going to end well for someone, probably her. As fast as Cassandra pushed her legs and scooped at the water, it wasn't enough. Glancing down in panic as the sharp-toothed witch closed the distance. The water brightened, bursts of light catching Deirdre's bracelet in distracting flickers on her wrist. The surface wasn't far, but it was clear the witch would catch her before she broke through and got someone to help her escape. Cassandra's box of rage burst open and gave every angry thought in her head the green light to tear the place apart. The fear and fury building inside her finally jumped to the front and slid into the muscles of her arms and legs. Cassandra spun to face her pursuer, with her fists out, baring her teeth. "Leave me alone!" A wave of dizziness washed through her head. It made her vision and the whole world feel slippery. Her own voice rang painfully in her ears, as if she had yelled through a megaphone. The sound of her words rolled away from her, gathering momentum and shattering the water into a milky cloud of tiny bubbles. Cassandra floated in the lake, mouth gaping. She hadn't expected that. She had sent something powerful out to get rid of the witch, something that apparently wasn't free of cost, and just as suddenly, it was coming back for payment. She fought the sudden shaky feeling in her head and let her body drift in a cartwheel that brought her upside down, facing the lake's floor, toes pointed at the bright surface. She drifted and breathed in the lake, shocked at what appeared to be water turning to vapor at the sound of her voice. The witch sank into the gloom, eyes closed, her pale arms curled around her drawn-up legs. Silence returned to Red Bear Lake. Dead leaves and silt floated around Cassandra, and blood coiled through the long tangles of her hair. Holy crap, I am tired. The slow spin almost had her facing the sunlight, and Cassandra looked up, but didn't have the energy to lift her hands, cup them, and swim to the surface. It wasn't even that far away. Her head sagged back, lolling to one side, and she stared up through no more than 30 feet of water at the blinding sun, flickers of it coming through soft swells and crests, a shadow of something on the surface looming off on her right. She didn't have enough strength to find out what it was. Then she remembered her anger. It roared to life, flowed through her, pounding in her temples. I didn't want to get into the damn water in the first place. Didn't want to go near it. That bitch Deirdre and her accomplices, Autumn and Cornelia, took me to the middle and threw me in. Then an uglier image stepped all over Deirdre and hung in the center of Cassandra's mind. The director of the entire girls' department of St. Clement's Education Center, Ms. Matrothy. Cassandra didn't like being pushed around, but she had never been able to stop Matrothy. The director was like a force of nature, a wall of brick coming at her, a monster with a brain so small it couldn't be reasoned with. With the sudden ball of anger banging around inside her thoughts, it took her a few tries to open her eyes. She looked past her feet into the gloom. No sign of the witch. Probably on the bottom, still in the fetal position I put her in. I stopped her just by shouting. I did that with my voice. Tilting her neck back dizzily, she started to shake her head, but it hurt too much. What the hell is happening to me? Sure, all the girls at St. Clement's got the "your body's going to change" talk when they moved into the 9 to 16s department, but no one said anything about breathing underwater. Now, this is different. This is something else. Cassandra felt as if she should feel out of place, but she didn't. Floating there, breathing it in, living underwater seemed right, more natural than living in the middle of Nebraska ever had. With the thought of her boarding school, the face of Ms. Matrothy pushed its way back into her head, shoving everything else aside. Cassandra bit down hard, grinding her teeth, and focused on the surface. Matrothy. Like before, the rage started small, but quickly turned twisted and jagged, roaring in her ears. Cassandra felt as if she could punch a hole through the world. Fists tight, the anger exploded inside her, a burn like acid lapping around her stomach, moving through her lungs into her throat. A hot halo that hung around her in the water, as if she had ripped her insides out. She kicked into the light,